The book had been on her shelf for 3 years. She reached for it on a Tuesday afternoon without thinking. She was looking for something light to read, something that required nothing from her. Her hand found the spine, she pulled it out, and a letter fell from between the pages and landed face down on the floor. She recognized the handwriting before she turned it over. 15 years of birthday cards and grocery lists and notes passed across university lecture halls had made Jade Monroe's handwriting as familiar to Renee as her own. The envelope had her name on it. Not Renee Bell, just Renee. The name that belonged to who she was before she became anyone's wife. The letter had never been sent. Renee sat down on the floor of her living room and read it. Then she read it again. Most women would have called immediately. Most women would have walked upstairs to where their husband was and said, "Explain this, right now, tonight." Renee folded the letter, put it back in the envelope, and went to the kitchen to make dinner. She was not done yet. She was just beginning. This is the story of what was in that letter and what Renee Carter Bell did with it. If you have ever lost a friendship and never understood why, this story is for you. If you have ever blamed yourself for something that was never your fault, this story is for you. Subscribe right now and drop a comment telling me, if you found that letter, what would you have done first? I read every single comment. Let us get into it. She had met Jade Monroe in the first week of university in a seminar neither of them had particularly wanted to take. They had been seated beside each other by administrative accident, and Renee had looked at the margin notes Jade was writing in her textbook, the word "no" in red pen every time she disagreed with the author, and said, "You know the author cannot hear you." Jade had said, "I am not writing to the author. I am writing to myself for later." That was the beginning, and for 15 years it had never stopped feeling like the beginning. The particular ease of a friendship that had recognized itself immediately and never needed to perform. Jade was the person Renee called when her father was diagnosed. She was the person who sat on the hospital floor with her at 3 a.m. when there was nowhere else to be. She was the person who arrived 2 days after the funeral with food she had not been asked to bring and stayed until Renee could sleep. When Renee met Marcus Bell at 28, it was Jade who had said, "This one is different." And Renee had believed her because Jade saw everything. Jade was her maid of honor. She held the bouquet at the altar. She gave a speech that made Marcus cry, which Renee had not expected, and watching her best friend cry at her wedding, Renee had thought, this is what 15 years looks like. This is what it means to be known by someone. Then, in the 3rd year of the marriage, they had argued. It was not significant by any external measure, plans that had changed too many times, words said in the wrong tone, the kind of argument that should dissolve in 48 hours and leave nothing behind, except it did not dissolve. 2 weeks of silence became a month, then 3. Jade became busy in the particular way of someone who is decided to be busy. Messages answered slowly, then not at all. A birthday card that arrived late with warmth but nothing personal, the warmth of someone keeping distance. Then Jade moved to another city. One phone call to say she was going. Renee had said, "I hope you are happy there." Jade had said, "I am trying to be." Renee had spent 3 years replaying the argument, finding every place she had been wrong, every word she should have said differently. She had carried the guilt of it like a stone she had decided she deserved. She had been wrong about all of it. She just did not know that yet. Renee Bell had been teaching art at Jefferson High School for 11 years. She had a classroom she had painted herself, a deep, warm ochre that the administration had questioned and the students had defended, and a desk covered in student work she kept meaning to file and never did because she liked having it visible. She was the kind of teacher students came back to visit years later. She asked questions that showed she had actually been listening. The house was theirs, bought 6 years in, a 4-bedroom in a good neighborhood with a backyard that Marcus mowed on Saturdays, and a kitchen that Renee had made entirely her own over 8 years of small improvements. It was a good house, the kind of house that felt like a home when you walked into it. Marcus Bell was a corporate lawyer at a firm in Midtown. He was charming in the way of people who had spent years being rewarded for it. Easy with names, easy with a room, the particular warmth that makes people feel chosen. Renee had loved that about him at the beginning. She had also, over 8 years, quietly observed that the warmth was consistent regardless of who it was directed at. It was a skill. That was not necessarily a fault, but it was something she had noted. For 3 years she had been noting something else. Marcus was somewhere else even when he was physically present, distracted in a way she had not named because naming it would have required her to consider what was causing it. She had been in the stage of gathering information without drawing conclusions. She was good at that. She had been doing it her whole career. She had thought she would address it in the spring, when things quieted down at school. She would not need to. The book on the shelf would address it first.
She read it twice on the living room floor. Then she carried it to the kitchen and read it a third time at the table with better light. It began simply. Jade's handwriting, the name only Jade used. Renee, I have started this letter 14 times. I am going to finish it this time, even if I cannot send it. 14 times. Jade had started and abandoned this letter 14 times before she finished it, and then she had not sent it, and it had sat inside a book on Renee's shelf for 3 years. You have spent 3 years thinking you lost me because of an argument. I let you think that because the truth was worse, and I was a coward. Renee read that sentence twice. I let you think that. She kept reading. The truth is, I left because I was in love with your husband. I have been for 4 years. I have hated myself for every single one of them. The room did not move. The afternoon light through the window did not change. The refrigerator continued its low, steady hum. Everything in the house stayed exactly where it was. She kept reading. I tried to stop twice. He would not let it end. Both times I told him I was done. He told me that if I stopped, he would tell you himself and frame it as something I had done to him, not the truth, his version. She put the letter down. She picked it back up. I also need you to know that leaving you was the hardest thing I have ever done. You were the best thing in my life for 15 years, and I destroyed it. Not because I stopped loving you, because I could not look at you and keep doing what I was doing, and I was too weak to stop doing it. She was already at the last paragraph. She read it slowly. You were never the problem, Renee. You were never the problem. Jade. 3 years of being the problem. 3 years of replaying an argument and finding new ways in which she had been wrong, new evidence for the verdict she had handed down on herself. 3 years of carrying it, and Jade had let her carry it. That was the part. Not the 4 years, not even Marcus, not yet. The part that sat in her chest like something she could not breathe around was this. Jade had let her believe for 3 years that she was the reason the friendship ended. She folded the letter. She put it in the envelope. She went upstairs and put it on her nightstand. Then she went to the kitchen and made dinner. Marcus came home at 6:30. She served the food. He talked about a case. She asked the right questions at the right moments. She looked at him across the table, really looked at him, the way you look at something you were seeing for the first time, even though you have been looking at it for 8 years. You seem quiet, he said. Long day, she said. He nodded and went back to his story. She ate her dinner. She was not going to confront him tonight, not on emotion, not without knowing exactly where she stood. She was an art teacher. She knew the difference between reacting and deciding. She was going to decide. She called her attorney at 9 o'clock morning on Wednesday. Carol Hughes had handled a property dispute for her 3 years ago and had given her the full picture before telling her what to do about it. That was the quality Renee needed right now. She made the call from her car in the school parking lot, 10 minutes before her first class. I have found evidence of a 4-year affair, she told Carol, documented in a letter. The letter also states that my husband used threats to prevent the other woman from ending it. Threats of what kind? Carol said. He told her that if she ended it, he would tell me himself and frame it as something she had done to him. A pause. "Come in Thursday at 4, Carol said. "Bring the letter. Do not touch the joint accounts. Do not change anything visible. We map your options before you have any conversations with your husband." "Saturday for that conversation," Renee said. "Saturday is fine," Carol said. "Thursday first." Renee ended the call. She sat in the car for 30 seconds, then she picked up her bag and walked into school. She had 4 classes before lunch. Her students were in the middle of a unit on negative space, the shapes defined not by what is present, but by what is absent. She had always found it the most interesting concept to teach. She taught all 4 classes with complete attention. That evening, Marcus came home and talked about a case, and she listened and asked the right questions. She watched him the way she watched her students work, looking for what was underneath the surface, looking at the negative space, the shape of what he had chosen not to tell her for 4 years. She cleared the table, she washed the dishes, she went to bed with the letter still on her nightstand. One more day.
Carol's office was in Midtown. Renee arrived at 3:55 on Thursday. Carol read the letter without comment. Then she read it again. "The threat claim," Carol said. "Is it corroborated by anything beyond the letter?" "Not yet," Renee said. "I intend to verify it directly." "If it's accurate," Carol said, "it changes his position significantly. Georgia is a no-fault state, but conduct during the marriage is relevant to asset arguments. More importantly, a man who threatened a third party to protect his own interests is a man whose credibility in any future proceeding is already compromised." They spent 40 minutes mapping Renee's options: the house, the accounts, the timeline. Renee left at 5:15 with a clear picture and a follow-up appointment for the following week. She sat in her car for a moment. Then she drove home and waited until 8 o'clock. She called Jade from the living room window. Jade answered on the 4th ring. The silence that followed had weight, both women inside it, neither moving first. "I found the letter," Renee said. "I wondered if you would," Jade said. "I have one question," Renee said. "I am not calling to argue. I am not calling to tell you what I think of you. I need one answer, and I need it to be honest." "Okay," Jade said. "The part about him not letting it end, what did that look like specifically?" A pause longer than the first. "Both times I told him I was done, he said that if I ended it, he would tell you himself," Jade said, "and that he would tell it his way, not the truth, his version, where I had pursued him, where I was the one who refused to let go. He was very specific about it, very calm." Carol was quiet. "You threatened him," she said. "Yes," Jade said, "he did. That doesn't excuse what I did before that point, but yes." "Did you love him?" Renee said. "Or did you get confused about what it was?" "Both," Jade said. "He pursued me first, for a long time, and then I fell in love with him, and it stopped being something happening to me. I own the choice. I don't get to give that back." "That's the honest answer," Renee said. "Thank you." "Renee?" "Not tonight," Renee said. "Maybe not for a long time. I don't know yet." She ended the call. She stood at the window for a while. She had come into this week thinking she had lost one person. She now understood she had lost 2, and that the second loss was the more significant one, because a man who threatens a woman to keep her silent is not a man who made a mistake and was afraid. That is a different shape of person entirely. She called Carol's office and left a voicemail. She needed to add one item to the agenda for next week. Marcus was at the kitchen table with coffee in the sports section when Renee came downstairs on Saturday morning. She was dressed, not in weekend clothing, in the earth-toned blazer she wore for parent meetings. Her hair neat, her posture the particular kind that signals to anyone who knows her that she is fully present. He looked up. Something moved across his face. Not recognition, not yet, but the first edge of it. "You look nice," he said. "Thank you," Renee said. She sat across from him. She placed the letter on the table between them. Marcus looked at the letter. He looked at Renee. He put down his coffee. "I found this on Tuesday. It was inside a book Jade left with me 3 years ago. It was addressed to me and never sent. I am going to tell you what it says." She told him. The affair. 4 years. The argument that was never the reason Jade left. The 2 times Jade had tried to end it. And then, calmly, without changing her tone, what Jade had told her Thursday evening. The threats. His version versus the truth. The specific calm with which he had apparently delivered them. Marcus said it was not what it looked like. Renee placed the letter in front of him. Marcus said it was a mistake. Renee said, "Jade ended the friendship 3 years ago. I spent 3 years believing I had damaged the closest friendship of my life because of an argument. I need you to tell me whether you knew the real reason she pulled away." A silence. "She told me she was going to pull back," Marcus said. "I assumed it was the argument. I didn't ask." "You didn't ask?" "No. So for 3 years you watched me carry guilt for something I did not do, and you said nothing." He did not answer. He did not need to. Renee stood up. "I need you to stay somewhere else this weekend. I have an appointment with my attorney next week. We will discuss next steps through them." "Renee," Marcus said, "I don't want to lose you." "I know, but what you want stopped being the organizing principle of this marriage 4 years ago. You made that decision. I'm making mine." She left the kitchen. She heard him sit there for a long time. She heard him pack. She heard, eventually, the front door. Then silence. She went downstairs. She made coffee. She sat at the kitchen table. His wedding ring was on the counter beside the coffee maker. She looked at it for a moment. Then she picked up the letter, folded it along its creases, put it in the envelope, and placed it in the drawer of the kitchen sideboard. Not thrown away, not displayed, simply put somewhere that was hers, in a house that was going to be hers, in a life that she was already building back into the shape it was supposed to be.
The divorce took 7 months. It was not easy and it was not simple. 8 years of a shared life rarely disassemble cleanly. But it was orderly. Carol was thorough. The house was equitably valued. The accounts were separated. The paperwork was signed on a Thursday morning and Renee was at school by noon. She told her friends directly, after the fact, without drama. She had made the decision. She had executed it. She was not asking for opinions. She was informing people she trusted about a change in her life. Most of them said, "I'm so sorry." She said, "I'm not," and meant every word of it. She did not reach out to Jade again. She had not decided she never would. She had decided she was not ready, and that "not ready" was a complete sentence that did not require a timeline attached to it. In the spring semester, she had a student named Deja Williams, 16 years old, technically gifted and stuck, the way technically gifted students get stuck when they understand the mechanics but have not yet learned to trust what the work is telling them. Deja was working on a self-portrait. She had started it 6 times. Each time she abandoned it at the point where it stopped looking like a photograph and started looking like something she had made. "You keep leaving at the most interesting part," Renee told her. "It stops looking right," Deja said. "It stops looking like what you expected," Renee said. "The work is telling you something about yourself you did not plan. You can listen to it or you can keep starting over." "What if I don't like what it's telling me?" Deja said. "Then you find out something true," Renee said, "which is always better than not knowing." Deja finished the portrait 3 weeks later. It did not look like a photograph, it looked like Deja, which was a different and more interesting thing. She placed second in the district competition. Renee kept a photograph of the finished piece on her desk. 1 year after the letter, Renee Carter Bell was at her kitchen table on a Saturday morning with her coffee. The drawer of the kitchen sideboard was closed. The letter was inside it.
She had not opened it in 4 months, not because she had decided not to, but because she had not needed to. The letter had told her what she needed to know. She had used what she knew. Things had changed. That was what truth was for. The house was hers. The title transfer had been clean and properly documented. She had repainted the kitchen last month, the same warm white it had always been, just fresh. Sometimes fresh was all a room needed. She was not dating. She was not ready, and she had decided that not ready was not a problem requiring a solution. It was simply where she was, and where she was had its own value. Marcus's ring had been in a small dish on her dresser for 6 months while she decided what to do with it. Last week, she had decided. She had dropped it off at a jeweler on Peachtree who did estate resale. She did not know what it would become. She did not need to know. It was not hers to keep, and it was no longer hers to carry. She thought about Jade sometimes. She thought about the 15 years and tried to understand them honestly. Not the last 4 years, and not the 3 years of guilt that were never hers to carry, but the 15 years of something that had been genuinely real alongside the things she had not known about. She was not sure yet whether those two things could coexist in memory or whether they canceled each other. She suspected the answer was neither, that the truth was more complicated and less satisfying than either resolution, which was usually how the truth worked. She was not in a hurry. She had learned, in the past year, what she had always known about art, but had not always applied to her own life. The most important decisions are not made in the moment of maximum feeling. They are made afterward, in the quiet, when you can see the whole composition. She looked at the closed drawer. Then she looked out the window at the Saturday morning outside. She had a full day. She was ready for it.